Okay. So, as I was saying, Tony Bromley is our judge tonight from England for our last competition of the year. Tony is a professional photographer with over 25 years experience. He's been awarded prizes in England from the British Institute of Professional Photographers and the Royal Photographic Society. He was given a very prestigious fellowship award by the Royal Photography Society in 2016 for his work on creative geometric abstract art that falls under the title of dynamic suprematism, which goes back to around 1913 as a Russian form of art, actually from Poland. The artist who started this was Polish and Ukrainian. I'm going to ask Tony to talk a minute or so about his abstracts, and a sample of which has been in the newsletter for you to take a look at. And then after Tony introduces himself, we'll get started with tonight's competition. So as a reminder, our next session will be the first Monday in November, November 7. Jeff Schaefer will be doing a member talk on doing videos instead of still photography. And with that, Tony, I'll let you say hello, and then we'll get started.
Okay, thank you. Yes, hello, everybody. And thank you for having me along. I have had a cappuccino and also an espresso. So I may not get to sleep till about 4 o'clock, but I should be good for the next couple of hours anyway. And always doing this kind of puts the energy levels up. So even though I may start a little bit slow, I think within a couple of minutes, yeah, I will certainly have those energy levels coming through. But photography competitions do that anyway. And a lovely bunch of work, I've got to say straight off, that have come through from the club. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Yeah, a suprematism, not really heard of by a lot of people, even on some parts of the art world. Very, very deep and a lot of information behind it, but highly abstract and geometric art that was derived as said, kind of like at the turn of the 20th century, and a lot of controversy around it, and rare to see in photography. And generally, if you see something that's kind of like working around those lines, it still tends to be quite objective in that you can see where it's come from, where I actually took the purest form, which is to have the art as non-objective and highly geometric, and produce that photographically, to the point that every composition is actually made up of one photograph and its original geometry that's been abstracted from there. So it's not like cutting shapes. And really, you know, I even talk about it, it may even come up tonight, but even with any of our own photography, you know, if you take something like a landscape is made up of shapes. It's just that other things start to come into play. And we're generally talking about organic shapes, whereas I'm taking generally man-made shapes and then producing and exploring composition with them. To the point, you know, it's very, very unusual. It got me Fellowship of the Year, which you're always so proud of a fellowship, but then to get Fellowship of the Year was just like unbelievable. And as a highlight of my career, one of the highlights of my life, because, you know, we have to take into consideration family, but I had my family with me when I got the Fellowship of the Year, and that was awarded at the Royal Society. It was an amazing evening for me. So abstract is kind of like an unsung hero. It's very hard to do when you want to do it well. We'll be talking a little bit about that tonight with some of the images, but some interesting abstracts. So it's good to see that coming through as well. On that side, you see I've got a hat on tonight, and I know Vince popped a picture around, I believe, of me with my Yankees hat on. I've got that here tonight. So I have a Yankees hat there. We're in New York and Massachusetts, tucked slightly for a few minutes into your state as well as we were driving around. Had a wonderful time in New York, and had it cancelled twice because of what's been going on in the last couple of years, but we finally made it. And one of the highlights was a New York Yankees game. Amazing, much better than cricket, by the way, baseball. And there's an Englishman saying that to you. So much more exciting. I've got a Route 66 on there. I'm not going to put that on tonight either. But we did the tour of 5 national parks back in 2017. Again, amazing. Here's an unusual American one. This is SM, if you can see that, SMQ, which is a Barber brand over here. I guess it must be over there as well, which is Steve McQueen. So he's all things American as well, and one of the best actors ever, as and a pretty good racing driver and motorcyclist as well. So, but this one is a photographer's one tonight. If you can see that, that's Yosemite. So has to be Yosemite if we're going to put some form of Americana on our heads tonight. So that's why that's there. I know you've got to kind of like finish off time at probably at the actual physical club there about 9:30 tonight. But at the end, I'm happy to stay for a little while and have a little chat with those of you that are on Zoom. I hope we have some time to do a little bit on Photoshop as well. I'm going to try and do that. We've got a lot of pictures to get through tonight, but they are actually pre-marked. So it's just me giving some comments on there. Whenever I drop marks, I always want to try my very, very best to give reasons why. So that's my task, and a little help along the way. And if we do get into Lightroom, not too much to go on it, apart from really where maybe we can do some things with dodging and burning, which, you know, I think we should all do a little bit more on that. And I'll talk a little bit about balance within composition, and you know, just trying to get the visual weight of an image correct. So a little bit of dodging and burning and cropping more than anything else, because actually there's not too much wrong beyond that. There's technically some very, very good work tonight. Okay, I'll hand back to you, Vince.
Okay, with that, if there's going to be surrounding noise, you can mute yourself. We'll play that by ear. We'll go through the images. We're going to start with Class B Nature, and then go to Class A Nature. And as I go through the images, Tony will give his comments on the images, and you'll see the scores, not the scores, I'm sorry, the place winners come up as the images are shown. The scoring sheet will be on the website, and a link to it in the next newsletter. And with that, I'm going to share my screen. And I wanted to show you, just as a reminder, the abstract work that Tony was making reference to. This is one of his pieces, and this is Tony receiving his award for his fellowship because of his work in that abstract field. So with that, we'll start Class B Nature. And I assume folks can see my screen. Tony, do you see that okay?
Yeah, that's all good. Can I just double check with you as well? Do you need me to say the score after my comments?
No,
or is that
they'll have the score and the whole score sheet to see subsequently. So whatever constructive comments you want to make as we go through would suffice, Tony.
Lovely, thank you.
So I'll show the image, show the title, and then the author. So Class B Nature, the title of this is Great Falls. By Karen Lay. Tony, do you have a comment on that one?
Yeah, so we'll kick off then. Yeah, wonderful set of falls here, and high energy coming through on these. And I love the way that the flow's coming all the way around the outsides and then down into the foreground here. And you really capture the whole feel of the actual falls and what it has to offer the viewer, and you really kind of like do get a feel for the power of this coming through. A couple of things that really, for me, just let it down. And one is, you know, we're always going to go to the white points on any image, and you know, if there needs to be some detail there, then let's see it. And there are a few hot spots, particularly around in the middle areas. A bit of a shame, because you look at that large area of kind of water coming through on the right hand side, and you've captured that beautifully. There really is some gorgeous textures in that white water on the right hand side there. And you know, it's not too bad, because some of these white spots are a bit further away, but they do kind of like pull forward. And I just wonder about that sky. It's quite a demanding sky coming up at the top there, when really this should be about these gorgeous falls and how you've kind of put them in the composition so well. So the sky starts to get a little bit overpowering for me on that. Of course, it's not easy, because you know, it means going back another day and with maybe a different sky. So so yeah, great power coming through. Do like what you've done with the bottom half in particular.
This is Raindrops, a study in pink and yellow by Mia Curran. And this got, as you'll see on the bottom, honorable mention.
So what I generally call semi-abstract almost. I mean, we can see what's going on here with this and the plants. And you've chosen a very, very narrow depth of field. And I do know it's, you know, we're talking about, from the author, a study of pink and yellow, but really we get taken to these wonderful drops of water in the middle here. And that's what the picture is all about, because you're telling us that's where we want to go. And it's almost up front and center, so we're going to go there. And then I do find like some of the extremities around the edges here just start to pull us away. And particularly that bottom left, where it's quite out of focus. And then when we look at the yellow, so there's a lot of visual weight going over to the left, pulling us that way. But we really should also be thinking about that point of focus. It's a hard one to do this, because you know, we've got some very interesting shots of flowers coming up, and you've kind of like gone totally the other way, which is really brave. To me, it's also the creative way to go, and that always makes it the harder way to go. And it's trying to assemble these parts together to get some sort of visual balance working. And I just think that's what's let it down here. But technically, the technique you've used, I do actually like. Just getting that arrangement just right.
Mill Creek by David Lobel.
So this one, it's one I hope I get a chance to have a little work with you on Lightroom. And I have done some preliminary work with some of the pictures tonight, just to try and speed things up, and I've saved them as little snapshots within Lightroom. And you look at a scene like this, and you almost can kind of glance over it. But what I think the author's done is they saw some wonderful light, and it is there. You can just see it coming through, but I think we need to see just a bit more. And it's quite often the eyes see things differently from when we put it into print. And I'd like to see a little bit more dodging and burning going on. Some of you may think, well, you know, there's not much going on there. It's quite subdued, but I think there is some wonderful lighting here. And I think that's what was seen initially. And it's a very, very simple scene. And you could turn around and say, well, what else is there to offer? But I think you've got the crop right. I think the assembly is almost there. We have got just a little intrusion in the top left there with that trunk, but that's minor up there. And like I say, I think this is a celebration of light and texture, and some of those lines that are coming through as well. And I think a little bit more dodging and burning would just really make this sing quite a lot. So hopefully I can show you something on that a little bit later on.
Jellies by Jim Kessel.
Yeah, I do like the title on this, because I mean, it's what it is, isn't it? But you've kind of like just taken it just a step away. And there's almost the inner kid on me here thinking, you know, sweets and that sort of thing. But we have got these very interesting jellyfish. Love the color. I mean, we have a zoo at Colchester, and they've got some of these, and they do that under this, whether it's ultraviolet light or blue light or whatever it is, and it does work really, really well. For me, it's just about again going back to assembling everything. It's not hard. It's not hard to do with these. They do move quite slowly, but you've got to pick where do you go for the crop. Both in camera, and then if you need to do a little bit of kind of like wiggling around when it comes to post crop as well in post production. And for me, I'd like to see either going one way or another. One is give us more, so it becomes more of a pattern shot, because they are very interesting. You've certainly got some of that coming through, or we kind of like loosen things up a little bit and see a bit more of maybe the rest of the tendrils of the rest of the body as well. And then maybe you're looking at maybe if you can get just a little bit more depth of field on that side. So we've got something in between there. It is very, very interesting subject matter. We have got it sharp in the middle. It's probably shot through glass, so you've done very, very well for that. But it's trying to really kind of like uniform and get some harmony coming together on this. So, so yeah, interesting and unusual one, that.
Sunflower Pollinator by Tim Huey.
Always think sunflowers are hard to shoot because it's trying to come up with something different, and you can go kind of like full up and front, or go with something like a semi-side view on this. I do like this view, and you've done pretty well getting most of it sharp. And it's not easy because these are the big flowers, aren't they? And literally, we've got some wonderful textures coming through here. Big part of what this flower is all about, as well as those amazing bright colors. And I was actually at had a group workshop of touring the National Gallery and the Tate Modern on Saturday. I don't know if you picked up in the news, but about a week ago, Van Gogh's Sunflowers had tomato soup thrown all over it. So we was right. They had it back up at the end of the day because it's protected by glass, but they had some demonstrators there. But literally, we were appreciating Van Gogh's Sunflowers, and this shows you why as well. So yeah, some lovely texture come through. I do like the angle coming in. For me, I would like just, I know it's tiny, but this little honeybee or whatever it is there, it's lovely that it's small and kind of like shows a contrast of size here, but we're just starting to lose it. And it is important here. If you think about it, if it had gone just another petal up where there's a darker petal just above it, and then those brighter yellows of the bee would have come through a bit more. Just a little bit of a shame about that kind of petal in the background that almost looks like a dark line at that crucial point. Really, really unlucky in some ways on that. And it just kind of like pulls away from getting, again, some sort of harmony coming through on that. But the actual main flower itself, absolutely beautiful, and exposure spot on for that. So well done on that.
Poem by Barbara Kaufman.
Well, a picture, and probably the key picture tonight, that really worries me, because I'm wondering if I'm a little bit dumb, but I'm going to try my best to pull through with the author on this. And I don't know what the poem is, so maybe I'm being a bit dumb on there, but maybe it's an overall more global feel that, you know, we're looking at maybe the serenity of what this small part of this tree or shrub has to offer in the movement, the textures and the lines and the flow within this section, within this kind of semblance of shadows and highlights and midtones. So we've got some wonderful textures and tones coming through here, split up by these lines. I will talk a few times about visual balance. To me, it's a little bit heavy to the top. I don't think we need all that space down the bottom there, because for me, the poem of this is all about this wonderful part in kind of like the top 2/3 there. And it may not hold a lot of excitement to a lot of people visually, but I'm a one that kind of like does get a bit excited about textures and color as well, but the textures are absolutely beautiful, and I'm happy to explore it. It's almost like a kind of like a natural Jackson Pollock, where you want to go around and just kind of get a feel for it all and get a little bit lost. And maybe there is some poetry in that kind of like feel to this picture. So I do like the whole concept of that. Well done.
Lotus by Karen Lay, and this got second place.
Yeah, well done. It was so near on this, but let me come back to that last of all, because I think it's an absolutely beautiful picture of this flower, and the quality is superb. Colors gorgeous. What you're doing is, I think, and this is always important with this sort of thing, that you're showing it off to its best. And it's not, you could say it's not the most perfect flower, but I kind of like those two petals dropping a little bit. It adds a little bit of movement to it. And we don't, well, most of the time we don't get perfection, but kind of like it's natural perfection that's coming through to me. But it is absolutely beautiful. And all I would say is crop a little bit off the right-hand side, make it front and center. The flower, your technique is really selling it all, and make it front and center, say, here I am, appreciate me, and we're going to do that. And don't worry about a little bit of space on the right-hand side. I don't want to go over there. I want to stay with what you've given us, and it is absolutely beautiful. So well done for second place.
Old Age, Barbara Kaufman.
So the importance of a title, thank you for reminding me of my old age. My wife and I actually had a talk about that. We was talking this morning about, I feel a lot stiffer these days getting up in the morning, especially with our knees. And I turned around and actually said this morning, that's called old age. But we've got a flower here showing those signs of it, of later years, or should I say later days, because that's what it is. It's interesting you've gone that way with something, yeah, in its latter part of its life, surrounded by these other flowers here. And you've done a not a bad job in a difficult situation, because trying to separate this and say this is what this picture is all about. And at times I talk about the figure ground relationship. You generally, it's not always, but you want the figure's got to stand forward of what's going on and supporting it. And it does start to get a little bit lost, but you've kind of like got the depth of field coming shorter to help with that. What's really helped is we've got those reds going down to a darker tone, so that certainly helps as well. And it is sharp where it needs to be, but then we've just got a little bit too much interference with some purples in the background there, kind of like that dark heavy area top left, and a little bit of brightness down below. And there's just a touch of kind of bright highlights coming to the left of the main part of the picture. It's a difficult area to photograph, isn't it? And not easy to do in this lighting. And you know, I sometimes say, you know, take some secateurs or a little pair of scissors and maybe cut a few bright spots out. I know not everyone will be happy with that, but it's trying again just to bring things together to get some harmony coming into play. And it just needs just a little bit here. But I think you've done a good job of a difficult background, actually, and pulling that forward, considering what's there.
Woodland Vines by David Lobel, and this got first place.
Yeah, well done. If you think about this, in some ways, this is a little bit similar to Mill Creek, and I was talking about that lighting in amongst the trees here. And sometimes when you get all of this green, the best thing to do, if things aren't quite working with the light, is to take it to monochrome and then really show off texture and contrast and movement. And that's why this is done so well. It's not always everyone's like cup of tea for something like this, but it has got a lot to offer. And I think it would work very, very well in print in particular. And you'd really see that texture singing in a print, but it is there. We don't have to hang around too much with the texture, kind of like going from the middle upwards, because what you're doing is you're taking us around that area with these interesting high contrast, almost black lines. And I think it helps that top right hand corner. We hop over to a little loop. Circles and rectangles and squares are very, very strong points of composition. So we kind of like head off to the top right, we get pulled back in and then back down to that really interesting trunk. I think that helps just change and generate different interest there. And then we're back down and exploring again. So I do love some very, very simple elements that are coming into play here. And you've taken, I think, something that some people will say is mundane, and you've made it really interesting. So well done on that.
Feathers Flying Soon, Mia Curran, and this got third place.
There's some beautiful quality images coming through tonight at all levels, and obviously this is one of them with this sort of placing. And this sort of subject matter really has to show quality, and that's the reason it did so well in this. A lovely turmoil of movement going on in here, and I do love these subtle tones coming into play. Really works so well and shows the beauty of this kind of like, I guess it's a seed head of sorts, where again, it's not the showiest thing on the block when you think about colors, but it shows that there's more things than colors out there that can be absolutely beautiful. And yeah, texture, tone, movement really working well. I felt it was just tiny little bit tight on the crop. It shouldn't have a lot of space around this. So, you know, I do appreciate where you're going on it, but just a touch too much. We do want to see all of that texture. That's where you're going. Well done.
Fuzzy Flyer by Tim Huey.
Overall tonight, some really good macro work coming into play, and it's not easy to do. I don't do macro work, but I've had a play during one of the lockdowns, and after about 2 hours, I got about 3 or 4 pictures that I would say were half decent, and close to probably a couple of hundred that went in the bin. So it's not easy to do. And what you've done is you've got in close where it's supposed to be sharp is sharp. So well done on that. And do you know, I do quite like where you've gone on the composition of the actual insect itself, rather than saying it's all about the wings. It's all about the head and the body. What I think you've just need to look at is those shadow areas. It really has gone a bit too contrasty. We want to take some of those midtones out because they should be there. And what we're doing is we're losing some of the texture that this interesting insect has to offer. And also taking that contrast higher, we're starting to see some of those whites kind of like starting to aggravate our eyes, more so bottom right than the top there. But maybe take a look at what you're doing in the way of the conversion of your black and white, and play around with, you know, have you put too much contrast or too much in the way of blacks? Maybe look at some dodging to just lift those shadow areas a bit more, because when we get to the lighter midtones on the actual insect itself and around the head, you've done very, very well.
Okay, so that was it for Class B Nature. We'll do Class A Nature. Rainforest Eagle, Tom Story.
Okay, thank you for the title on this one, because when we've been over to America, whenever we see an eagle with a white head, we just think, is that a bald eagle? Which is probably totally wrong anyway, but it just shows how much I know about well, many animals actually. But it's a beautiful bird and a beautiful specimen, and you know, you've done everything right in getting the quality of the plumage of this bird right the way through the whole body and the head as well. And when it comes to like these, we're talking in the nature category here, what's going to elevate a picture like this? And generally it needs to be the energy levels, I say dynamics, energy, and what they're doing. And I don't mind, I think it may get the same sort of terminology over with yourselves, but we have this term bird on a stick, which generally means a low energy shot of a bird. And if it's done really, really well, there's not much else coming along in the competition that's kind of like got higher energy levels, then there's nothing wrong with that. And you've captured this absolutely beautifully. I don't mind sometimes some of the background coming into play. It's just maybe a little bit too much. And that piece of branch just on the left, something I called edge flicker, just, we don't need it. It's taken us over to the left. Every time we're appreciating what's going on with this beautiful bird that you've captured, we're just getting pulled to the left a little bit. And the last thing, I'd just tone the white feathers just a bit. It's there, but I think a little bit of burning, hardly anything at all, just to like pull a little bit more texture out of that would do the job. It's an absolutely beautiful bird. And from that side, I think you've done a great job on that.
Robber Fly with Prey by Jackie Henney, and this got honorable mention.
So, well done on this. And I think there's extremely high standard in this section, actually, as you'd expect from Class A anyway, but generally speaking, from a point of view of nature. And it's been very, very hard. And there is a good smattering of high marks coming in here. So I've had to be really, really tough in this section. I absolutely love this. And the fact that you have kind of like, although it's nature, you've crossed slightly into pictorial with this interesting crop and composition. And there will be times I would talk later tonight that I'm not always happy on the thirds. It's all about balance. And you should consider what space does to the rest of the picture. And sometimes space will destroy that balance. But all of this space to the left, I kind of like, because we've got that, again, that energy and movement coming left to right to say, bang, here's what's going on with this very interesting insect. And not only that, we really have got a differentiation in these colors coming through, again, to emphasize that we're right on this insect, and that's what it's all about. The reason I actually took it back, because I do think it's a beautiful and unusual way to go with this sort of subject matter, is it's just the end of this twig or whatever that is. It's just unfortunate that we've got this splash of color on the right hand side, and it also happens to be the kind of like same color values as the insect itself. So I keep, I wonder whether the members keep kind of like going almost like a tennis match, left and right, with these two things. And we don't want to do that. You've given it space, stay with the actual insect itself. And what you've done with the insect is absolutely beautiful. So well done. That's still a great mark.
More to come. Vince Pellegrini.
Okay, yes. Well, the title, does help us in the fact that, that's why we had these other buds coming into play, and how they like kind of come in from the sides, and again add some movement into this. The actual flower itself, we can see what it's all about and what's going to happen when more to come. But I still think that really it is about this particular bloom in the middle. And I just like a bit of separation on that one in the background. I do love the fact that that bloom in the background is going soft, because we don't need to have that sharp, because you're giving us all of that information on the main bloom itself. But a little bit of separation, and then I would just come in a little bit, because I really want to concentrate on these. I know there's these other buds coming into play, but just a tiny bit. And then again, this is always hard because this looks like it's been, this isn't something that I think that's been done in a studio situation, should be out there with nature. And, we've got a little dark area down the bottom, then on the opposite diagonal, a touch of brightness. And the reason for me, those two things are dragging me away is because what's going on with the rest of the background is absolutely beautiful. We've got, some people want complete blur, but I love these very faint lines coming through, and the way the light isn't bright highlights apart from that top left, but we've got like this wonderful light dancing around in the background, and it really complements this kind of like delicate flower. And so, it kind of like that middle section is really doing it for me, and it's just pulling me away from the sides there.
Hanging by a thread.
Quite unusual.
And
oh, sorry, yes.
Sorry, by Ivan Bubb, and this got 3rd place.
Yes, well done. Very unusual, and love the use of the black background, particularly with these spider threads, I presume they are. And I do quite like the way that this leaf, it almost looks like it's been slashed in half, but I'm pretty sure it's curled up, and it becomes like a couple of flames in some ways, which I quite like. Do like the placement in the frame with this and the space, how it works around there. Just take us straight to it, doesn't it? And those threads don't take us away from it. They're not strong enough to do that. For me, there was one thing that let it down, and it is a minor thing. And like I said, this is a really high-scoring group tonight, and some superb work. And what it is, it's just something where, annoyingly, I had to get one of my lens cleaning cloths out and check my screen. I wanted to be sure it wasn't a mark on my screen, but you've done such a great job with this, and there's a tiny little, I don't know if it's a dust mark or something coming through in the background, but just to the right of it, there's a small dot. And I'm really sorry, this is Class A. The standard is very, very high. And when I'm going for, first, second, and third, I've got to really be picky, and I'm being ultra picky on this one. It is an absolutely beautiful piece of work. I do love it. But it did do very, very well still. So well done.
Turtle Reflecting by Lee Reeves.
Really, really interesting subject matter. Very, very different. And if you all think when it comes up, it really does have impact because of the colors and these wonderful patterns that the turtle has to offer. For me, I felt it was a little bit on the bright side, and I would have dodged and burned this a little bit just to help things through with the whole balance of it. And you're kind of like giving us what is a symmetrical subject matter, the way you framed it, but it's not actually symmetrical in the crop. So it's just off left of center. And to me, this is a symmetrical shot, and I would have cropped from the right and just done a little bit of dodging and burning. I have hopefully got time to show a sample of what I mean on this. And the reason I spent some time on this, I absolutely love this picture. I think it's really unusual. Colors are gorgeous. We still want those blues to come through, those gorgeous, rich, kind of earthy browns as well. And then some lovely patterns which you'd expect from this. And quite unusual what's going on with this kind of like underneath reflection of the water. So there's some great points in here. It just needs, I think, a bit of work in post-production to really make this image pop more than just having quite a high exposure on that.
Before Sunrise, Joanne Stam.
Lovely, serene feel to this. In fact, I'm looking at this and just kind of almost want to, I don't think it's tiredness. I almost want to kind of like lay down and have a little drift off and just enjoy the scene. Yeah, gorgeous feel to those tones and colors coming through. Some interesting pastels. We've got a lot of I don't know, maybe, forgive me, but I'm going to say geese. Maybe, I think. So let's take a look at this. you've gone for backlighting where we're really going for silhouettes here. And they are interesting. We've got a lovely repetition of shapes coming through. And I think that does work where they go to black with this light reflected from the sky into the water here. What's always hard with something like this is, you know, as soon as you start to get more numbers coming into play, they don't do as they're told for you, do they? And it's a bit like I work a lot in street photography, and sometimes you want all the planets to come into line to just get that ultimate shot. And if we could have got just a little bit more separation, the one that really annoys me is there's one number 3 going left to right, and it's kind of like become part of a rock that's coming out of the water there. So it's these tiny little things as you walk along here with these birds that just take it away. I'm not sure about this tree or shrub in the bottom left there. I think this is a very linear picture, you know, left to right, right to left. You've got some interesting layers, and that bottom left kind of like breaks that layering up. And I love what's going on beyond that, because the black shapes are very, very strong, but only a small part of the rest of the picture when you look above. But the top half really kind of complements the whole scene, and what we quite often see in this sort of setup here. So some interesting things going on there. You know, you would have waited 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to try and get separation on these, and it wouldn't have happened. The reality is they would have been gone possibly in you know 1 or 2 minutes anyway. So I think you've done a great job considering some interesting content, and asking nature to assemble things for us is always very, very difficult, isn't it?
Green Moss Road by Dutch Bagley.
Wonderful, a wonderful moss road. You wouldn't want to tread on this, would you? And that kind of has that feel to me that I just don't want to ruin what you've captured here, and you've captured it really, really well. This did very, very well in marks, and so it should. And it's about the quality, the fact that you really have nailed this depth of field to get all of that quality coming through and show us the beauty of what is really very, very simple subject matter, all of this wonderful moss, and how it kind of like stands out and becomes part of its own texture within this brown texture behind it. This is a road, this is a journey. I mean, we don't need to know that you've called it a road, but we can see that we've got a journey going into the depths of the woods. And I do like what's going on the top left-hand side with these trunks, but you know, the journey kind of like ends at that really interesting little tree in the top there. And for me, and it's unfortunate because you couldn't have done anything about this. I'd have liked that tree to stand out a little bit more. And it's green on green. To dodge and burn this is very, very difficult to do. I think it had just been a slightly different color. And you know, you couldn't do anything about that. Whether autumn would change that, I don't think so. But whether it is, you know, just a bit richer in some oranges or some yellows, but you've got yellows behind that. So I'm struggling with this tree. And if I'm struggling, you know, it's not easy for you to do. So this did do very, very well, and only just missed out really, which is a shame. It's a beautiful piece of work. So well done.
Yellow Lady Slipper, Larry Stam.
Yeah, another near miss, actually. Again, some beautiful quality coming through on this, and well done for going in close. I do think it's a tiny bit close. I'd like just that top right corner just to have had that held in a touch more, but you do need to get close to see the beauty of what this has to offer, because what's also here is quite a few different textures that are coming into play. Plus we've got the actual slipper itself, where we have this unusual kind of like, it's almost smooth matte feel to it, and that in itself is quite interesting. The other thing just really, which is kind of like letting it down and only marginally here, is, you know, you were a bit unfortunate with the lighting, a touch on the flat side. And all this needs is, and again, I will show this later if we have time, but if not, just a little shallow S-curve on it, just to give it a little punch. When you get flat lighting like this, a little S-curve will just lift it. And try it and turn it off and on, and you'll see what I mean. It just gives it a bit of oomph, and that's all it needs. But absolutely beautiful. You've really captured the beauty of this this very, very interesting flower. Thank you.
Ambush Bug by Ginny Lodge, and this got first place.
Yeah, well done. What a beautiful bug. Is that correct? Beautiful bug, or is it ugly? I think it is very, very interesting, isn't it? And a superb piece of macro work. Everything is sharp that you need to be sharp. In these like modern days of focus stacking, some people say, oh, the back of the abdomen's just going soft, but we don't need to see that. We've got everything that we need up front and center with this bug, and the quality of it is absolutely sublime. It really is beautiful. Exposure's good. These colors coming through, it really, again, it's all about showing something like this in nature to its very, very best. It's kind of like the bug version of that that flower earlier on, that lotus flower. And then, we've got quality coming in as well, still with one of these pieces of dew, if that's what it is. It might even be something coming out of the leaf there. And some of you may turn around and say, well, actually the bottom half, should that be a little bit darker? I'm happy either way on this, but what I don't want to see lost in this shot, if you start darkening down the bottom half, we've also got some really amazing quality coming through of these, hairy underneath parts of this leaf as well. It is a picture about quality, not just about this bug. And remember, this is the bug's environment. So I think this kind of like all harmonizes very well together. So well done.
Becoming Friends, Dutch Bagley.
Excuse me, just having a little slurp of water there, keep me going. And yeah, becoming friends, at what point does it become that it gets to a point where they're smothering one another and no longer friends? So I love the whole concept of this title. And again, this is a bit like the one where we had I think the mill trees and mill pond, etc. We've got to try and produce more out of this, because we see it with our eyes and then trying to bring it back photographically. I think I can see coming through here, but potentially a mild vignette possibly around the sides, because you're trying to bring us in to the reds of these plants here. And I understand where you're going on that, but we're still kind of like getting them a little bit lost. And you may think, well, that's strange that we've got red on green, but there's a lot of green. There's some bright green in the middle there. And there is a little bit of competition when it comes to kind of like talking about not colors, but tones. And to me, that's a little bit of a shame, because this has a lot to offer and you have given us a lot of that, but I would just like a little bit more separation between the two. This is one that I would like to show what I've done in dodging and burning on this, to see how this comes even more impressive, because the textures are important overall, but they are very, very similar textures. And we really want these intrusive reds, because they're intrusive in the actual environment, but we want them to be a little bit more intrusive visually to the author, to come to the front. And we can do that with some interesting work in post-production. Unusual, interesting piece, and I really love what's going on with the colors. Just bring it back forward a bit more.
Nature's Beauty, Ivan Bubb.
Yeah, not the brightest flower in the families of moths. I guess that's what it is, because it's just these wonderful, almost orangey sulfur tones coming through, and everything is sharp on this this moth, which is important. The eye's going a little bit dark, But again, whether you could tease anything out with some dodging in post-production to help on that, because the rest of the insect is absolutely beautiful. Is this its natural habitat, this flower? Well, if it is, that's where it needs to be. It's always going to be difficult to get everything in focus. You know, that softness coming through kind of does distract you a little bit. I would have darkened it just a little bit down if possible. But the other side of it is I would just crop some of the right-hand side off. And again, I hope maybe I can show this if we get time. It's not about being, I think, you know, the head's kind of like more or less on the third. It's not about being on the third. It's making sure this space is complementing the rest of the space around it. Just come in a little bit, and then suddenly the insect will actually come into play more off center and occupy that space and produce better balance on that though. So yeah, but the insect itself, absolutely beautiful. Little bit of post-production.
Red-breasted grosbeak by Larry Stamm.
I thought with this one, a little bit unusual in that we haven't got lots and lots of blurred background. You've actually shot the bird amongst all of this kind of like thicket of hedge or tree. And, you know, there are times that this is what we see, and it's not like that it's in the background and intruding. The hedge, the environment of that hedge becomes part of the bird, and kind of like has realism coming into play. I would like to see the bird's head more in profile, because it looks like it's got a very, very interesting beak, and we can't see that. And again, it's about showing the animal off to its best, and I think that's where it needs to be. Some of you might think these white flowers are quite intrusive. Do you know, I quite like it. It's a bold bird. Red is the most powerful color to attract our attention, and it probably does a good job for the females if this is a male bird. But the fact that we have the power of the red there, and the flowers, because it is in its environment, kind of like complement the environment, and they don't pull too much. They could be a little bit darker, but you know, that red is helping with that. And I actually think you've kind of like got the spacing just about right. The bird, I think, needs to be there when you look at where these other flowers are around it. And it does produce some interesting movement around the bird. And we always fall back to that red breast. And so I think an unusual one on this, just if you get lucky and the bird kind of like gets its head in the right position.
Sticky Situation, Bob Gross.
So I think you've done really, really well for getting it sharp where what this picture is all about, and that is all of this pollen going all over the front end here. It's a little bit, well, I say a little bit, it's very bright, isn't it? When you consider this after like the previous picture, suddenly we want to reach for our sunglasses. So that brightness kind of like says to us, well, we're getting distracted and taking us away from what the picture should be about. So that starts to kind of like change the figure ground relationship. And it should be about this bee. And like I said earlier, you know, macro work, we've got some amazing work tonight, and it's very, very hard to do. And then these things up this close move very fast. So trying to capture this with a narrow depth of field, if you look at that, that wing on the right-hand side there, you know, that's going out of focus, and you've managed to get the eye and that bit of pollen in focus where it needs to be. When they're moving this fast, trying to get everything where it is difficult. So we've got a third of the actual insect is hidden by the flower, which is a bit of a shame. If we could see a bit more of the insect as well as the pollen, I think that would help a lot. I do like the lines, although this is quite bright really, those interesting curves and lines pictorially I do like there, but I think we just need to see a bit more of the insect itself.
Nat Orgy. Ginny Lodge, second place.
Yeah, there's a handful of images tonight where the quality is outstanding when you look at detail, and this is one of them, and a very unusual viewpoint as well. And the tones and quality from like the eyes going through the thorax to the body, and the fact that we've got very soft brown tones. Again, I said at the beginning, you know, I can get excited about texture and color, and I'm not talking about just bright colors, but the subtleties of tonal color. And this bug has some beauty in that, and you've really captured that. The reason I marked this down again is a high scoring image. I just would have taken some off the bottom. You're kind of like, again, gone into a more fine art pictorial presentation of this insect. And I think there's just a little bit too much space in the bottom half. Just come in a little bit. It needs to be just a little bit above center, but not center. And you've taken it too far. And it changes the whole balance of this image. It is a strong point of emphasis with this. I just think it needs to center up just a little bit downwards, center downwards more rather, not center up. But beautiful piece of work. Well done.
Interested.
Well, it is.
Story.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Jumping in there again. Do you want to say the name again in case people didn't get that?
Yes. This is Interested by Tom Story.
I can see where the interest comes from, because it's interested in us. So we could say in some ways there is a communication there, and quite often judges like portraits to have people looking out. Doesn't always have to be the case, but we are getting a communication there. I did talk right at the beginning about, you know, when it comes to particular animals, if we can have some sort of energy level coming up, whether they're doing something. And that always helps. I tend to, I know you have a fair amount of these, albeit, you know, not as many bison as maybe a couple of 100 years ago. But whenever I see exotic animals, and you've got to remember in England, a bison is an exotic animal to us, that we quite often see things like wildebeest from Africa and this sort of thing. I kind of like compare them to our domestic animals and say, well, we have lots of cows in fields here. Any sort of like animal from foreign fields, really, I expect them to be as good as a really good picture of a very boring cow here, but we want to see something in the way of higher energy levels. And for me, this just is kind of like standing there staring at us. I'd like a little bit more. And it's a bit of a shame because, you know, this is not easy to do. I think it's shot on a long lens, and the detail is there in the whole head. The quality is there. A little bit bright in that bottom left-hand corner. And maybe, again, it's always hard because of the time of day. I think if the light had been on the other side, so we could have had a bit more light on the whole of the left of their face and the body, again, it would just lifted the coat of this animal a lot more, because you have got it sharp, and light would make this shine a touch more. Not easy to do though, is it? And how long are you going to stand there in the freezing cold and wait for this? So yes, thank you.
Just Hanging Out, Vince Pellegrini.
Yeah, for me, a couple of minor things on this. The background, well, I've been talking about, you know, this is one of the softest backgrounds, and it does work at times. In this instance, I think it does work. And we've got that lovely soft greens and yellows, coming through, and it does complement the insect itself. I've only ever once tried to photograph these. Absolutely appalling bunch of pictures I got. So not easy to do, probably the wrong time of day because they're too active. But a couple of things on this, really. I love the shape of it, how it is on this twig. It's a shame about, it's always going to get top lighting, but the top lighting on the actual body going out to the back there is very, very bright. And all you need is a little bit of light, the lights and the body's just twisted a little bit, and you don't get so much top lighting. And that would help there, because we could then get the richness of those blues and blue grays coming through. And the other thing on this, and again, just have a look at this, because it's traditionally put on the third, and I actually think there's too much space. If you crop this a little bit from the left and the top, don't take it to the center, but it will be much stronger. And it is a strong picture in itself, but it will just intensify that strength of showing off this wonderful insect. So a little bit of cropping, and watch that top lighting. Not easy out there in the real world to do that.
A Cardinal Pair by Joanne Stam.
Yeah, so I talked earlier about a bird on the stick, but we've got a pair, and this is also about a pair working together. And plus they are different. I guess they're a male and a female. And I do like this from a point of view of we've got some symmetry going on, and it's kind of like mirrored symmetry that's coming into play. So I said earlier, sometimes it's a little bit of luck that helps. And I think, you've had this happen, it's kind of come into play. I don't mind that we've only got one tail. And it may be that the female doesn't have such a long tail. So that's true to it. I love this kind of like, you get the feel of, there's ice on there, there's a snowy background, and it's not intrusive. They do pop. Again, there's a touch of orangey red helping with that. And really the one thing that made me just slightly mark it down is because of the symmetry. I would have centered it up, and it does work. I had a look. Just take off some of that right hand side, center it up, and it is a symmetrical picture, and that works so much better for me. But a beautiful picture, good quality coming through as well on that.
Hibiscus Bud by Jackie Henney.
Yeah, thank you for really playing with my mind on this one. Again, a near miss, really. I think this bud is absolutely beautiful. So many flower buds don't really have a lot to offer, but you're showing the best that this can give us in this picture. I do like this narrow depth of field. And how it just kind of disappears into the background. So it's looming out, and the colours being complemented in the top half in the background there with these kind of like purples and blues are working so well. So you're messing with my head with this leaf on the left-hand side. And it's no accident, is it? I'm sure you've left it in and you like it because it's pointing to it. Do you know, I like it, and that's why it's messing with my head. I actually took this out in Photoshop, and I can't make up my mind on this. My gut feel is it shouldn't be there because the bud has been rendered so beautifully, and I want to stay with the bud. But you've been really brave, and you have purposely left it in and made it a compositional element. And I've kind of like come on the side of without, but it's, the reason it's still got a really good mark is I know where you're going from this, and it is, I think it is a hibiscus leaf as well, so it kind of like works with it. But have a little thing. It's an interesting one where I've been talking about balance tonight. That can you see that when you bring the two together, they are very much on the left-hand side. There's this thing called proximity. When things start to get close together, they become not two or three, but they become one. So if you think this is over to the left, and maybe there's just a tiny little bit too much space on the right, but that space on the right has got some interesting subtle softness to it that kind of like complements the whole soft play, particularly on the lower part of this bud. So yeah, well done. I've gone a little bit too much long on that one, but this was an intriguing piece of work tonight, and like I said, you played on my mind a lot, so well done.
Arctic fox from Norway. Seaball. Thank you. I can never say that word. By Lee Reeves. Sorry about that.
You know, I will forgive you, Vince, because when I saw that, I thought, I'm glad it's going to be you that's saying this and not me. So yes. But yeah, it's important, you know, because it gives us some place. And you gave us a little bit more information on that. But we know that from the point of view of that's an Arctic fox. And what I love about this, I mean, you can see why it's what it is in its natural habitat, and that how it really does blend in so well when you start looking at the tones of the rocks, even though there's no snow around there. It's very easy to miss it. Some of you are going to guess what I'm going to say, and the fact that, you know, I want the energy levels up on this. I don't really just want it standing there and staring at us. So for me, you know, I really want more, and it is quite static and doing very, very little. And that is a real shame, because I think you've got the depth of field right. I think it is important we see quite a bit of this environment without it intruding too much, because it does complement the coat and what this fox is all about. And the detail is very, very good. I would just burn in the tail. It's just going a touch too bright. And I think if you shot this in raw, I think that the detail is there in that tail. And that tail is important, isn't it? Okay, it's quite different from the rest of it. It's a big part of what this fox is all about, and I think it could be brought out there. I don't think it's got too bright. There is a tiny bit of detail there, but yeah, an interesting shot of an animal in its environment. So you've captured that part very, very well.
I guess that's our last one. Let me just check. Okay, yeah, that would be the last one in Class A nature. So thank you, Tony. We'll go to Class B pictorial next. And the first one here is Playing with Angles by Dave Lobel, and it got 3rd place.
Yeah, well done on this. Very unusual, and I can see some thought has gone into it. Very high key, isn't it? Not easy to do high key, and I quite like, again, remember when I talk about, and I should say when we talk about contrast, it's not always about contrast of tone, but also elements that are going on in our pictures produce contrast. So we have kind of like lots of smooth surfaces, and then these I'm guessing they're glass because they're broken, but we've got the harshness of glass against all of this like soft whiteness going on, plus some interesting geometry coming into play as well. It is high key. It's what the author wanted high key. Sometimes we get kind of like sucked into what we want, and you know, I will sometimes leave something for 24 hours and go back a day later and take a look and say, how's it looking? And also turn things upside down, because that will give you a different perspective as well. And the reason I'm saying this is that I think it's just a bit too bright, even though we're talking high key here. I'd like to see a little bit more detail out of this glass, if that's what it is, or you know, I think it is rather than plastic, just to get some of that interesting texture and reflections coming through. And also it would help just with those pieces that are on the floor. And the second bit really is, and again, I think it may be intentional because we are talking angles here. We have got some perspective coming into play with the walls left and right. And I would, if we're going to have those walls slanted, I would have accentuated that a bit more to get some even more angles. Although I would have been very happy with them being straight left and right, because it then frames high key still, but we get kind of like a natural frame within a frame. And we've got enough angles going on within this, plus that contrast of the glass against the symmetry that's coming into play with the floor and what's going on the wall there. Have a think, you know, have a think with that, straighten that up. But certainly I think just bring the light levels up a little bit more. But I understand where you're going on low key. Do you know, there's something I say to a lot of people when I'm doing group workshops is, so you can come back at me and throw this back at my face, but there's no correct exposure. It's where we want the exposure to be. If you want this even brighter, you could take it that way. But for me, when I look at content, and I think you're offering me a little bit of that texture of that glass coming through, and you're teasing me, and I want a little bit more, and that's how I'm feeling. Good mark, though, don't forget that. So interesting piece of work.
Bridge on the Topahakan, Mia Curran.
Yeah, when we look at this, I mean, this is I mean, I'm not a landscape photographer. I take in fact, my best landscapes were probably my tour of America over 5 national parks. And part of the reason for that was I never get up for sunrise. I just hate it. But for 5 mornings I did, and they were my best pictures. But, you know, the rest of the time we can go past views like this, and they're absolutely beautiful. And you've captured kind of like the beauty of this bridge and its environment, but it's just trying to lift it a little bit more. And that's so difficult to do, particularly at different times of the day. And what's happened here is that the sky has just really become quite overpowering, but you don't want, you know, the sky to dominate, but you just want a little bit of fine texture coming through, and also just to take that brightness levels down. But you don't want a big stormy sky either, because it's not about the sky, it's about this wonderful old bridge. And then I know it's the bridge, but, you know, this bridge I think is really quite beautiful, plus that little cottage on the end there. And I'd have been inclined to just take this, whatever this white paint, or it may be some form of natural decay that's going on the right hand side on the top of this pillar of this bridge here. Well, I keep going over to the right there because there's white texture coming into play, and don't forget it's on this linear part of this bridge. And then the whole picture, when we come back to left, takes us down this little lane. It's one of those occasions I would like a person there. I don't always worry about having people in roads and paths, but I actually want someone coming down and taking us back into the picture and back into the bridge again on here. But when you look at the exposure, you look at, in this kind of like fairly dull lighting, you have brought an awful lot out of this bridge, and I can see the beauty of it. It's just bringing all those other things into play that I think would help take this to another level. But you've done well, considering the lighting that's there. It's quite often it is all about the light on the day, isn't it?
Hyacinth Field by Karen Lay, and this got first place.
Absolutely beautiful. It may have helped that like I said, on Saturday I was at the National Gallery in Trafalgar Square, and the National Gallery covers hundreds of years right up to the 1900s. And for me, I always say, once we get to kind of like Turner, and then the late 1800s, and where it finishes the gallery with the Impressionists and Post-Impressionists, and that is always the busiest part of the gallery, and it's certainly my favorite part of the gallery. And you really do, you have managed to produce an impressionist feel, which is, I think it's the ICM technique. It may not be, it could be post-production, but you certainly have that impressionist feel coming through. Some wonderful movement at an angle, which I actually really like, so a slight diagonal, plus that wonderful, you know, Impressionism is also about capturing the quality of the light and the colors, and you have done that. And you know, they were happy to get richness coming through in the colors, and that's all coming through on this. I love the way the bottom of this trunk just kind of like really grounds everything, and we work around it. Yeah, you really have kind of like captured the essence of Impressionism here, and gone very bold with a big chunk of brown in this, but everything kind of like really circles around it. It really is a beautiful picture to look at. So well done.
I Injure October by Tim Ewing. And this got second place.
Yeah, well done. Not easy to photograph this sort of stuff, and I can see that you've put some time into it. I'll tell you straight away why it got marked slightly down, and that is it's a little bit too tight in the frame. Okay. Sometimes you want the whole reflection. I think you're right. You don't want the whole reflection in this situation, but a little bit more from the bottom, plus top, and just a touch more to the sides. It's just feeling a little bit cramped, and a very, very minor point, and it is minor, but it is important, particularly with a black background in this lighting setup. And that is, I'd have closed up the line on the very top of the bottle. You can see where the black bleeds into the black background. Just paint a line in there. Take maybe one of the white edges from the right-hand side of the bottle and clone it in there. But you have to line it up right to clone it in there. But get a white line along the top of that will close it. Very, very minor point. I'm saying this because you've done some really, really good work. I think the beer, I mean, some of these specialist beers are cloudy. It's not the sort of beer I would like to drink. And quite often we see these commercial pictures like this where you've got some backlighting and the beer glows, doesn't it? And it may well be that this is one of those cloudy beers. So I'm not going to knock it from that side of things. So that's just those couple of things. I can see you've really worked superbly with your lighting setup. And people quite often think you use things like fish fryers or long soft boxes, but generally what you're using is long lengths of paper and bouncing light to the right intensity off a paper to get these white stripes. And I've done some commercial work with this in the past, and you have to work in very, very dark conditions because it shows everything. And you really have done a great job of controlling the light in the studio here. So, you know, a very high mark still, because you really are doing some good technical work here. Well done.
Pals, Barbara Kaufman.
So a lovely moment. Do you know, I do a talk on the pictorialists from like the turn of the 20th century, and there's actually a lot of American pictorialists within that talk. And one of the things that comes out of it, and from my work within investigating all of this, is that when it came to portraiture back then, a lot of the portraiture they used to do were shots of friends and family. And that's a great thing for us to do in this day and age, because not all of us are happy taking pictures of strangers or paying for models. And when you've got these objects, I'm going to call them, for free, and we can spend lots of time doing that, and that's what we should do. And we get some great pictures. And the idea is this. Always children and animals, isn't it? Really, really hard to do, particularly when they're out and about active. They're hard enough in the studio if they're kind of like a little bit hyperactive, but you know, you're getting them playing with whatever they're on here, and it's going to be a very, very active environment. And it's unfortunate about how the lighting's just kind of like crossed onto the head there. And for me, you're telling me it's Pals, but he's the little boy that we can see the full face on. You know, he doesn't seem too happy that he's there with him, whether he's trying to get in and play with almost looks like a little digger or something. He's on there. And I just think I'd like to see a little bit more interaction between the two there to help on that. And, do you know, we're photographers, and I know I've come from a professional background, but when I take pictures like this at club level, I'm just like you. I'm an amateur, and I try a bit of everything. So, but as an amateur photographer, we might not want to take a lot of pictures like this on a day because we're out with family, but that's when we should do it, because we've got the ability to do this. And this stuff is hard to do. And to get everything working right, get the light right, get them interacting together. But thankfully, in the digital age, we can take lots, and you want to get one that works. It's not easy to do that. I hope you've got more stuff there. And don't forget, when it is our own family and friends, but particularly family, if they're our children or our grandchildren, we kind of like get sucked in because that's what they are. We have to step back and say, we love them. You know, he's a gorgeous little boy here. Could we have a little bit more out of it? And that's a hard thing to step back and do. But a lovely little moment. And actually, I think there's a great little, there could be an amazing sequence amongst all of this that could work well as a panel.
Sorry, that was a little premature.
No, that's okay. I was ready.
Fireworks Exit by Karen Lay.
Yeah, well done on the exposure of the fireworks in particular. I mean, it's all exposed correctly, actually. But I do know fireworks are hard to get right. I've shot a lot of fireworks at weddings over many years. They've been very popular for a good 15 years plus on that. The bad news at weddings is you've got to get it right. And, you know, you're hoping the first one, if it's a heart, the first one, you've got to kind of like guess where it's going to go off and hope you get it for them. And then the same with you do the last firework. And the reason I'm saying that is, you know, when a firework goes off, you've got to say, well, where is it going to be? And we've got it cut off a bit. We really want to see the whole of the firework. And I know it's not easy to do. And then if, you know, if you cut it off, you're going to hope you're going to get the next one similar to this. You're going to move things up or go wider and get it. So give me the whole firework. The firework is an important part of this picture. And you have got it right. It's a shame about the wind. And I know this, that, you know, you get on the windier evenings, it starts to kind of take away the detail of those gorgeous kind of golden fronds coming out from this firework. And that's purely the wind moving on a longer exposure. And I actually think you've got the exposure right. On this, it's a little bit cropped at the needs a little bit more space at the top because it's cropped. And you know, I'd also take a little bit more off the bottom. We've got a very big, I call them dead triangles, and it's always hard in these corners, particularly in the bottom. But if you get a big chunk of, and not just black, but if it's a massive color, and to me it says if you get a dead triangle in one corner, just crop it up. Those lovely light trails bottom left are not that important because actually the light trails that are underneath this firework are absolutely beautiful and I think complement it really, really well. So just bring it up a little bit and that's working a lot better with a stronger composition. But well done on exposure and really getting everything sharp in this where it needs to be. And like I say, we've got to be forgiven on the wind there.
The Docent by Barbara Kaufman.
I don't know if it's just me, and don't forget, I suppose you could say I'm European. I know we've had Brexit and that, we are still in on the European continent, I guess. We're not that important, Great Britain, are we, to be all out on our own? It has a feel of a Frenchman to me. I don't know why. It just has that sort of feel to it. The hat maybe is kind of like almost like a beret, and he has that sort of feel that I sometimes see of these guys playing cards or checkers and having a beer or a coffee when we go over to the continent here. Interesting piece. I actually think this one does need eye contact on this. If you imagine, let's look at him for a second and imagine that he just suddenly glances up at you and then we get taken in. It's quite interesting. But I just think we need those eyes to engage us a little bit more. I like this. We've got natural split lighting, I think, coming into play. I think probably could be a street light or something. I don't think it's daylight, and it kind of like does work really, really well. If you're not going to have him looking at you, get him looking over to his right side too, as we look to the left. And then if you put your hand up and just crop from the right up to just the edge of his shoulder, and if he was looking left, that would be quite interesting, I think. But I think looking centered down is where this just starts to come apart, unfortunately. And that's a shame because everything else is right. You've handled some low lighting very, very well. And I do like these angles. There are very subtle angles on his head and his shoulder. That adds interest and that works well as well. So yeah.
Balloon Seller, David Lobel.
I did mention that, you know, street photography is very, very hard to do. And if I go to London for the day on my own and I come back with one great picture, I'm happy. And that doesn't always happen. And if I come back with like 4 or 5 where I think to myself, well, I'm happy with those. They might not make the best marks, but I'm very, very happy. And remember, all our photography is about us being personally happy. We're all very, very happy with our pictures tonight, and that's what it's all about. So, street photography, very, very hard to do, an extremely dynamic environment, and especially when you're not trying to control it, and that's the case here. And I actually think you've done a very, very good job overall on this. There's just a couple of things that would have helped, which partly were beyond your control. And that is that we always, with people in the background, there's going to be some intrusion. But if you're going to go for kind of like a 35mm lens rather than a 50mm, and a 35mm or even wider these days, 28 is starting to become quite popular, then you do get the environment, and you have to accept that as long as the environment is working. But I do find the guy to the left walking away from us just a little bit intrusive. He's right on the top of that balloon and takes us there. Plus the balloon seller is looking left, so we've kind of like go there. And then we've got this, I know it's a person on the right hand side, but it's a massive grey. It's this T-shirt coming into play. And you're going to turn around and say, well, it's about, maybe it's framing him. But really the strength is about this balloon seller. And again, this one, I just think if he'd looked at you, and I think that would have just drawn us a lot stronger into it. Recently, I shouted at a person on the back of a canal boat. He was really interested in some very flamboyant clothing. And I just wanted him to, he was going away from me, and I wanted him to look over his shoulder. And I shouted at him, so I got the contact, took the shot, and I took about 4 or 5, and not one of them was in focus. I mean, I'm just going to put my hands up here and say, I get it wrong big time sometimes. And it's because it's not easy to do. Things are moving very, very quickly. So I understand that. So it's almost there. I do love this guy. Well done for taking shots of him. And maybe this is the best of the bunch, because actually it's very, very hard to do.
The picture about nothing.
Yeah, a bit of madness going on here. I do like a bit of madness. And what I really like about this is that I can see you've actually spent some time thinking about it. And that's important. Sometimes I'll just see a couple of these little, if they're Lego figures or something, just standing doing very little. But you've actually assembled, let's say you've assembled the studio here, okay, on this. That comes through, and there's some technique coming through. You've kind of worked with your aperture to look at what's going on with the depth of field. I kind of like get drawn away from things with the title, because you've said it's a picture about nothing, which I would like it to be about something, and you're telling me it's about nothing. And I'm trying to pull on things here. Because you have produced a scene for us, and in some ways there's some intrigue there, and I'm trying to like pull on parts of this, because I actually think the assembly is good. In fact, the lighting is good as well. We've got some kind of like cross lighting going on here, but I kind of like can't work out the full concept. Why has she got a goldfish bowl, and the sun's coming back with a pretzel? Why are these two people in the distance coming, looking across at them? Why has she got an angry face? He's got a happy face. It's almost like the left side, they're at a marriage guidance council or something. There's a telephone, and it's not an office, but it is an office. So you've put an awful lot of thought into it, but there's just different things pulling me away. So I'm getting lost in the story. And I know you're saying there's a picture about nothing, but I don't think it is. At the very least, why is she holding a goldfish on there? So some great still life stroke tabletop lighting and work gone into this, but take it to another level if you can, please.
So this was by Tim Huey, and this got an honorable mention. Sunset on Bethel, Mia Karam.
So yeah, I mean, the great news about the winter coming up is at least you don't have to get up too early for sunsets and sunrises are earlier as well. You don't have to work late as well. But a beautiful soft sunset here, not the most glamorous, but these, again, these lovely yellow, oranges and sulfurs coming through. It is a shame about these trails in the sky, these jet trails, isn't it? And I think you could have quite easily taken those out on that. So very soft, subtle picture. And start thinking about balance again here, because you've got wonderful detail, wonderful colors, some interesting shapes, gorgeous blacks against this colorful sky. Do we need those trees on the right hand side? And we've got an open gate which leads to just the top of another half a tree, and I don't think we need to go there. And that opening in the gate is quite important in this composition. We are always going to go to the brightest spot. So if we're going to go to the brightest spot to the left-hand side, I would crop this to a square. Get rid of that. Get rid of those trees on the right-hand side. The feature of this is that wonderful big tree just off left and center, isn't it? And if you make this a square, that gets rid of that jet trail on the right, it makes that tree more dominant, and we still have that gorgeous sunset coming into play. And then all we've got to do is take that jet trail in the top there off, and we've got a very, very pleasant balanced composition that's working.
Okay, and that's the end of Class B pictorial, and we'll go to the last Class A pictorial next. Highlands by Tom Story.
Okay, so I do like to spend a little bit more time with the Class B, so I hope they appreciate that. We're on to Class A, higher standards, but I'm gonna push a little bit faster just so we can make up some time. And what I will say is, although it's Class A, you know, you're all big boys and girls, so you can take a few knocks in Class A. And it's pictorial, it's not specialist, so you should be doing, you know, what you like to do in this. So I'm going to push through, get through that, maybe spend a little bit of time on 2 or 3 here and there, but make sure we get where we need to be. Okay, so yes, Highlands. Well, I guess we're talking north of where I am here. Very, very dramatic mountains coming into play, very, very distinct. Do you know, everything's there in what we need in the way of the focus, etc. For me, it's a shame about the haze. There's a bit of haze on these highlands, and you know, it is in focus. It's haze that's doing it. Just a change of the lighting, and I think you know that, you know, lighting is everything in the highlands and can be amazing. But if we want to really see that quality come through, on a day when there's less haze, would make a big difference to that. In particular, the sky, not anything, you know, dramatic. I don't think it needs to be, but kind of like the fluffy white clouds start to compete a little bit with these interesting mountaintops. But I said they are dramatic, they hold their own, but just maybe a little bit of cross-referencing going on with that. Okay, next one.
The Wreck by Lee Reeves.
So some underwater photography, which is unusual, isn't it? And there's even people doing it on their phones now because they're waterproof down to certain depths. So looking at this pictorially, I kind of like see this as semi-abstract. I think I can understand where you're going from it, as in it's interesting lighting coming through, but it's coming through from the side and from the front. I actually think you should have shot this from the other side, because we've got a big chunk of shadow of this wreck. And this wreck has a lot to offer. When you look at the parts that are in color and in light, you know, over to the left there and up center top, there's some interesting colors and textures coming through. And I think there'd be more of that on the other side. And you might have been affected more by the fact that you're seeing these light rays. And of course, you'll change the exposure accordingly. So we're getting some very, very bright whites coming through. And although, you know, we're not really sure kind of what part of the wreck it is all about texture, shape, color, and in particular light. And a big chunk of this is not in that good light. And that's a shame, because it's a really, really interesting subject matter. And I hope there's more there, even maybe going in closer, which I'm sure you've got the ability to do once you're underwater. Beautiful colors where it's coming through though.
Cigar Roller by Rick Shea.
Lovely quality coming through on this this old skin that's fast approaching me as well. But very soft lighting, which I think has been handled really, really well. And a near miss on this one. And the reason for that is I would have just liked you have taken a step to the left and then bopped down a little bit lower, just so we can see a touch more of his face and a bit more of what's going on. We can see within the hands there is a cigar there. We have got a profile of his face. The age of the man and the texture of his clothing is absolutely lovely. There's little trinkets around the edge there. I think you purposely got involved in the fact that you've got his profile on a black background, so we get a really good edge to his nose and mouth and eye line there. So I can understand where you are from that. I think, you know, it would just open things up just a tiny little bit more coming to the left there, but beautiful piece of work.
Beth Salome Asia by Dutch Bagley. This came in second.
Well done on this. Absolutely beautiful piece of architecture. And what you've done in post-production, I think, really complements it. Apart from the one thing, and that is that hot spot, that highlight, that soft rising sun, whatever you want to call it, it's been held there or put there on purpose. So I understand where you're coming from on that. And I think it would work in two ways. One, just keep it with the black, dark sky and that alone. Or two, don't make the vignette around this hot spot in the sky so distinct. Have it smoothing out even more. I can understand that you want some bit of extra texture there, but it is about this wonderful piece of architecture that you've shot so well and worked so well in post-production. And kind of like you step back and, you know, zoom out on it on your computer later or tomorrow and just see how dominant that is. And it doesn't need to be that dominant. That's such a shame. I think it's so unusual, this piece of work. Just think about, you know, the strength of that hotspot and really concentrate on what you've given us, and you've given us so well.
In a Mind's Eye, Vince Pellegrini.
Yeah, well done on going for something very, very unusual in the way of subject matter. And this is, again, this is not easy to do. I touched on this right at the beginning, the abstract, semi-abstract, trying to get balance within a composition. And that's a real big key thing with abstract, trying to obtain balance and harmony, and certainly where you want harmony. And the attraction is these absolutely gorgeous kind of electric colors, and the blues and the purples and mauves here, and how they come into play. But to me, it kind of like separates into two parts, because we've got these lighter tones down below, and I really want to stay with the top half, or maybe have that top half subtly reflected more in the bottom there. This is something where, again, because it's pictorial, you could almost kind of flip it over and just mask, using a mask, just bring it forward in the bottom there, just to bring the two halves together more. I really like what's coming through. There's some I think water lily leaves that are blue. Again, that's complementing what's going on the top half there. I think it just needs to work together on there. Like I say, I'm a sucker for color as well as texture, and really like this from an abstract point of view.
Hunsinger's Bridge, Joanne Stam.
So another bridge. It just reminds me of the film The Bridges of Madison County, albeit I like the bridges more than some of the storyline, I guess. But what interesting bridges they were, and this is kind of like similar to one of those. I think you could say this is cropped too much, but I personally like the crop because it is about this bridge, isn't it? And so we kind of home in onto it. From that point of view, that's why there's a couple of things I would change on this. I'd like a little bit more light inside, whether that could be done with supplementary lighting, or whether you could tease that out just with some dodging in post-production. Just lift those shadows a bit for me. And then that bright spot of sky, I think this is a sky that's not too nondescript and can work with it, but just darken that bright spot of the sky down. Everything else complements it really, really well. So a couple of minor things there, and you'd have a great kind of like commercial shot of this bridge?
Harper's Ferry Railroad Trestle by Julie Stauffer.
An unusual piece.
Sorry, this got an honorable mention.
Thank you. Yeah, an unusual piece of work, kind of like working with multiple layers, bringing them together, and trying to play with the shapes that they brought together as well. Again, maybe it's fortunate that I was at the Tate Modern in the afternoon on Saturday, and this reminds me of the work of Georges Braque and Cubism, and many people know of Cubism from Picasso, but he worked with this artist as well. And I actually prefer this artist's Cubist work to Picasso. And I actually said to my group, I've never seen it, but if someone could put together a fellowship panel of this sort of thing where it reeked of kind of like this artist's work, it would be hard to do over like 20 images, and it involve an awful lot of work, but it could be quite an amazing body of work. So, you know, take a look at the Cubist painters, and you'll see why this it's got a lot to offer. Now, while you're looking at this, just squint at it, close your eyes up a little bit. Can you see how those dark triangles, kind of like middle bottom, start to dominate? And that's the only reason I pulled this back. I actually want to move around this image more, and I don't want to be pulled back to the middle with these dark triangles, because I really do get this Cubist feel to it. And I know there's man-made structures here, and they are interesting, and they do form kind of like the structures and the geometry of this. It's a really clever piece of work, but just watch what you're doing with some of the tones here. I think I'd like to see more movement coming through here. Absolutely beautiful piece. It reeks of Georges Braque's work, so well done.
Antifungal polarized photomicrography by Ivan Bubb, and this got first place.
The specialist work done extremely well, and not all of us can do this, but what we've got to look at for me is what's going on with the composition. This is really into the realms of semi-abstract, and I think the colors are working beautifully. It is, I mean, they're not the most complementary colors, but for what the subject matter is, it actually works, and there are no rules, and sometimes things do work. And then take a look at the movement that's going on here. We've almost got a Fibonacci spiral coming into play here. And then I don't know whether they're crystals or whatever, but we've got some splattering of they almost look like insects or mites, but there's some interesting things to flow around within this image, and that works so well. It's an enjoyable image to explore not just the colors, but the textures that are going on and how they kind of overlap as well. And it's a thing of beauty without holding on to anything in the real world, and quite an unusual, I'm going to call it an unusual study more than anything else. So well done.
Hot Summer Night, Bob Gross.
Well done on some difficult subject matter. It's not easy to shoot fire and then get what you want working with whatever's around it, because it may not always be people, and the fire and the exposure you've got really well. For me, just give me some more space, particularly with the guy on the left hand side. And you have got some detail with the shadows on the right. Whether we could kind of move again left just to open him up a little bit, I think that would help. We could see a bit more of what's going on. I know we're not going to see what's going in the flames, but it opens up that middle section a little bit more. And it may also just move that reflection on the visor so that we can see a little bit more of the face there. I'm not sure, but that's where I'm going with it. And I just think that would help things a little bit more. But you've done a great job of low light photography with a difficult subject.
Moonrise at the Pagoda, Jenny Lodge.
You're very simple, and I think you've handled. I'm guessing it's kind of like a two layers put together. I'm I mean, with a very, very long lens, I guess maybe this could happen, but it has that feel of layering going on. And it does kind of like work. I wasn't too sure about the space on the right, but I actually think because we've got some of those brown tones moving to the right, the balance does kind of like come into play a little bit more with this. I'm not sure about the pinks and the browns really on this. And I do wonder whether the pagoda, if that was shot not at full darkness, but just with a bit more color, if this was two layers, and bringing them together would help a little bit more. And then we'd have maybe just a tiny little bit more definition to the sides there. But it's a really interesting concept. And if you've done it as a layered concept, I think you've done a good job on that.
Another view, Vince Pellegrini.
Okay, yeah, I like this again, semi-abstract. That's where we're going for it on here. But for me, this was kind of like just starting to have a lot of, well, it is having a discord coming into play because we're separating things out quite a bit. And then we've got this very heavy dark area on the bottom here. You'll hear some people say, oh, it's always good to have a heavy base. I don't think it's the case when we're looking at movement in composition. As soon as you start layering, start bringing about repetition, because we've got repetition going on here as well, and patterns starting to emerge, then there's nothing wrong in moving around and exploring things. Some judges will turn around and say, oh, I've got nothing to, lay my eye on, but there's nothing wrong in exploring around it, some pictures that have got some interesting areas to go into place. And I think this is separated out too much. We're almost into an exploded cubist. I was talking about the cubists here because that's got those elements, but they've separated out more. And I think just going with kind of like 4 or 5 layers, I'd work them more and start to get them producing its own form of texture, if you like. And play with these colors. You've been so bold with these colors, which I love. I even like some of it. I don't know if it's cloud in the top left-hand corner and then what's going on with some of these trees, but I'm constantly drawn down to the bottom here. And I actually think the good stuff is right up in the top 2/3 there.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1 by Jackie Henney.
Yeah, a bit of tabletop studio work here, which I had to play around on here. I'm very concerned about the color balance on here. And I think you've got a great concept here, okay? Very unusual. Not everyone would think about doing something like this, particularly going with this triangle format and then going from above. And that's the strength of this concept, I think, but it's a bit too warm for me. And I think you're using split lighting. I think you might be, there's some blue, possibly daylight coming from the right and some ambient tungsten from the left. And I think the tungsten, this warm orangey lighting, is kind of like destroying the reds. And maybe it's because I'm English, because I think these are Grenadier Guards that you see at the palace. And we want those lovely, black bearskin hats and those rich royal reds coming through, and the color is changing that. The other thing I would say to you just on this, bearing in mind you're giving us a very symmetrical piece of work, and you're doing this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and they are soldiers, and I tell you, the sergeant major would be shouting the roofs down. They are not in line, are they? Just a tiny bit of detail. These are soldiers, make them in line, get them in their ranks, just to finish off that upper edge there. But a really great concept. And I've got to say, I love the shallow depth of field. That adds another little extra element to this that kind of like makes it a little bit different.
A Bend in the Road by Larry Stamm.
It is a bend in the road, but I think it's too much road. Technically everything's right, isn't it? Great depth of field, okay. Do love the curve coming around, but it's a huge chunk of road, even though it has some texture to show us here. And then think about, where does it take us? To the point that if we're going to go to the mountain range in the distance there, do we need the cross on the left-hand side? Again, a cross is very dominant and we're pulling ourselves away over there. Just hide the cross up and go to the edge of the road there where we've still got some of those grasses. Suddenly that interesting tree then comes into play and actually works lovely on the top left there. If only we could see the top of it as well though. And then it makes everything else more interesting at the end of the journey there. And we don't get pulled away from it. I just think a crop would help on that one.
Crystal polarized photomicrography, Ivan Bubb.
So a little bit along the lines of the previous one, but where for me this one kind of like just doesn't make the same marks as the other one, is that I'm going to talk about balance again, but it's kind of like more weight to that bottom right hand corner because we've got the more saturated, richer colors coming into play, and like this turmoil of curves that's playing around this off-centered circle in the middle. And then we go to the middle and over to the left and the top there. Those colors are more muted down, and that may be intentional, but this is a pattern picture to be explored, okay? And I'm constantly drawn to the bottom right here. Occasionally I get tucked into that circle in the middle, but we're constantly being pulled down on here. Like I said earlier on, when you're working with abstract, you really want to kind of like nail and explore movement and what it does to the eye. This is just a little bit too heavily weighted to the bottom right for me, but absolutely beautiful.
Amish Bishop, Jackie Henney.
Yeah, lovely piece here. And I really love this kind of like framing. You know, I mentioned, you know, the balloon cellar earlier, and that intrusion on the right-hand side in particular. We've got a similar sort of thing here, but we are really isolating this man, and that helps with that isolation. The fact that you've also gone with a color pot where it's black and white with his face adds to that isolation. And with this person on the right hand side, he's gazing. I almost feel he's part of a group and he's gazing into the group. So we have that feeling with these other two people as part of that group, and that works really, really well. And then I do personally, not everyone will like this, I like that other hat cutting into his. Again, it's just, you know, bringing the two elements together and saying this is a people of hats. And it is pointing in the right direction, but you don't really need that direction because he is very, very dominant. You've done a good job of that. You know, a minor thing, he looks a little bit red in the face. Maybe it's cold, you know, or maybe you wanted to enhance his face because he's got such a fantastic beard, and we want to come back down to that face more than the beard as well. But interesting use of kind of isolation, I think, on this particular shot.
Blue Willow, Julie Stauffer.
So semi-abstract again, and I like the play of going with geometric shapes and then bringing nature into play here. For me, it's a little split again, and where I'm talking about, and sometimes things are split top and bottom. You know, we've got this pull on the lily pads down the bottom, and although there is some natural elements in the top, really it is about these blue triangles, and they are quite dominating. And again, it does kind of like split top and bottom for me. I'd like the two to come together. What you have here is some fantastic elements. I just think you need to work to bring the two together to harmonize this better. And I think you've got a great piece of fine art. Don't get rid of one or the other. Just, you know, try and bring whatever you've done in post-production, or it could even be in camera, in which case it's even harder. Yeah, bring those together and harmonize that. Interesting concept. I do like that idea.
Alone on the Moor by Tom Story.
You do get that feeling of loneliness because it is lonely little cottage here. For me, I'd like it to be a little bit more lonely. And what I mean by that is, again, I'd crop it almost to a square, get rid of that track on the moor on the left-hand side. It takes us up into the top to nowhere, and we don't want to go there. We want to see all of this space around this little cottage here, and just cropping to the left will do that. I personally do quite like the blue sea, but when you crop it square, that blue does become quite dominating. But you know, it is a cliff face there, isn't it, which says a sea. So I think the fact that you've minimized the sea is the right thing to do if you're going to keep the sea in it. But I'd like a little bit more in isolation from this.
Kicks by Bob Gross.
Well done on getting this sharp. You can go the other way, can't you, and have blur, and that can work as well, but you've opted for sharpness. For me, it was just, again, you know, these things are moving. It's just luck. But we want, I think, more of the faces. Got some really good kicks going on with the legs, which is, you know, what the title is. But we're going to be drawn to faces. And if we've got someone that's looking absolutely frightened, shouting, I think that's important as well. If you're going to stay with the kicks, why not crop the people out? You know, to just have feet and feet alone. And that really does say kicks. And that could work much, much better for the title. But, you know, technically, you've done a great job for getting something moving like this sharp.
1950 Hudson Commodore 8, Ginny Lodge.
A beautiful old hot rod, I guess we could say on this, and some interesting technique coming into play. I do like the fact that we've gone kind of like for low light, I think supplementary lighting on the main subject, and you've gone for this these star trails in the background. It kind of like does complement the hot rod feel to this, and something very, very contemporary. Watch, it's always hard, it's chrome, isn't it? But watch those hot spots on the chrome, you're going to get that. I think I would have lit this from the other side, from the right hand side. I know you want to light the front, but the right hand side has got a lot to offer. It would still light the front, and it may get rid of some of those hot spots and light up that chrome, which is actually, you know, the chrome that's not clear, nearest to us, because that chrome is important. I appreciate what you've done. I think you've put some interior lighting in as well. That's kind of like lifted that, what could have been a dark spot. That works very, very well. And I do like the composition. Notice the space on the right hand side, but we've got star trails pushing us in from that space. That works really, really well. Well done on that. Watch, I don't know, there's a is that a little cottage in the background or a little house? There's something just to the left of the headlight there, which I would have taken that out maybe. But really interesting concept. I think you've done some great work there. Watch what you're doing with the lighting.
Patterned Field by Larry Stamm.
So texture line, wonderful curves, movement going through here, some variation in texture as well that I really, really like. I think you've got the exposure right. I think the subject matter is great. I would just crop it. I don't think this is about the field more than anything else. I'm not worried about those top halves of those trees in the distance and the sky, if that is the sky there. And then I'd take a tiny little bit off the left. See where those curves take us out to the left there. I would get rid of that, and I'd come in hard on the top there and celebrate what this is really about and what you saw. And what you really want to give us is all of that texture, those subtle whites. Aren't those subtle whites lovely, with hints of blue-grey coming through? And then we've got this diagonal split of texture. And I think with kind of like more white, keeping as much of that top half in as you can when you do the crop will help kind of like counterbalance the heavier bottom right-hand corner. Very interesting piece of work.
Lancaster Balloon Festival, Rick Shea.
So technically, you've done everything right here. You've done an amazing job with depth of field, to the point I almost wonder if it is 2 shots, but I don't think it is. I just think you've got the depth of field where it needs to be. Some lovely warm lighting. These things do tend to go off kind of like early in the day or in the evening. I don't know if it's that early or that late, because looking at the sky there. But for me, I struggle with this from a figure ground point of view, in what's the subject about and what's supporting it and what's not supporting it. And from what I mean with that is, I find that we're conflicting between the balloons and the horses. And it could be that you're a real big horse lover, and that's why you shot these. If we look at them as horses, they're not doing too much. Okay, and I think what you're doing is you're giving us too much. We've got two pictures here, give us one or the other. Both technically have been done very, very well with the camera, but we're muddled with the whole concept and storyline of this, but you're doing well with your camera.
Coltrane, Speedbolt by Lee Reeves.
Now, interestingly, we've had a couple of like semi-abstract where we've kind of like got the top and bottom of the image kind of split into two, and we're into realism here, and we've got a split again. And I almost wondered, should we have no building on the right with this train? But I actually think you do need something here with this viewpoint, and it kind of like does work with the train as well. But I just think this lake in the background, it suddenly becomes two pictures, and they're both in their own very interesting pictures, but they are struggling to come together because of that middle section there. Some lovely tones on the right-hand side. We've got kind of like fog and mist, taking that back in the distance, which is acceptable, but you've held it well on the right-hand side there. The blacks have got just a touch too harsh, I think, on the train. We tease a little bit more detail out on what is primarily the front of the train to see that. But I do like, I mean, there's some beautiful subtle curves from that train heading out to that little shack there, and that works superbly. And I think that's why that's coming together in that area there.
Sunset Blaze, Joanne Stam.
A beautiful sunset here. It's all about the colors and the textures that sky is doing, plus those gorgeous kind of like creamy yellows coming into play in the base there. Have a look at what's going on in the bottom there, because we've got this, it almost looks like a container truck in the mid-ground there. I think it is a barn in the distance, but it's very dominant because it's a rectangle and it's quite light. And does it add to what this picture is all about? And I think the answer is no. You've done such a great job on the sky. And what I would do is I'd crop that right up to that tree line. Those trees, they're tiny little bits of detail that are absolutely gorgeous. And you have got that detail there. And they kind of like bobble along on that horizon line there. And it's then going to be all about the sky, and you've just put this beautiful little kiss of texture along the bottom just to help support the sky a little bit. And I think all you've got to do is crop that, and that will improve that enormously, because you've done a great job of that sky.
Alone at Night, Dutch Bagley, excuse me, and this is third place.
Yeah, wonderful piece of work. I actually hate sepia, and we've got this sepia feel coming into it, but that's me. I hate sepia. It doesn't mean I have to mark it down, and I don't. Okay, and I think you've put that into this because of there's just a few little paintbrush touches of autumn color in this island of trees, and you've used that color very subtly to bring it all together. And it kind of like does work with those subdued greens as well. And you've done something really well in that you've kept it center, and you said it's all about this island and reflection. And that's what I'm talking about, you know, and for that reason, apart from a tiny little rock or something on the left-hand side there, it's got balance, hasn't it? And I'd have just taken that little, you know, sandbank or rock or whatever it is over on the left there away. We keep going there, don't we? Even that little bit of tree right on the very edge that's poking up on the tree line there. We want to stay with this in the middle there. Those are two very, very minor things. Some people might like those little annoyances over to there, but I think it's all about celebrating this island, and you've put it in a very different concept. It's not bright, brash, middle of the day. It has some subtle coloration coming through. Again, we're approaching fine art with this, so well done.
And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. That was absolutely fantastic, Tony. It's 2:35 in the morning your time, so I can't ask you to do your processing imaging work, but your critiques, I think, were just wonderful and incredibly informative and supportive. And very detailed, which is why we went so long tonight, because you really spent a lot of time. with that. I don't know, maybe you and I will talk whether you can send me your final images that you worked on, or whether we can hold a special meeting and maybe come back and let you just talk about what your processing ideas. So you and I can address that, but thank you so much. If people open
thank
and make
you.
any comments, go ahead.
I'm happy to hang around for a few minutes. I wish you hadn't told me the time. I wasn't aware of the time. I mean, I have been keeping an eye. I know we want to get that 2 hours, but yeah, it doesn't feel like 2:30 in the morning here. I've got to say, I'm like I say, my energy levels get up when it comes to this. So.
Yeah, I think you're probably juiced up on your coffee.
Yes.
You have done this. So incredible expertise in my mind on the way you critique these.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm happy to answer any questions. Don't worry about my bedtime.
Unfortunately, the audio, the inputs coming from
Yeah.
the GoggleWorks are not working. They're having a technical issue. So the bunch of folks who are there together are not able to communicate. Is anyone here who's still online want to make any comments? No, I guess not. Okay.
Sorry. I thought you were very kind, Tony.
I do
Is
try
that for a
to.
Brit? Is there a caveat there? Is that for a Brit coming from an Aussie?
No, they haven't got the greatest history as colonialists, but I'll move on from there.
I would agree with you. Don't worry.
The GoggleWorks has said where all the members are. Thank you for all your work and your thought that went into the critiques, and they wish they could speak up.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I'll say thank you very much. I really enjoyed your critique, and I think you have a great understanding of how photography is really supposed to work. So thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Leon.
I would encourage folks to go over to Tony's website if you haven't been there and look at his work and his workshops, and he has online teaching. There's quite a bit of activity going on with his the Academy of Light. Is that right, Tony?
It's the Light Academy.
Light Academy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you and I will touch base, Tony, and
Yes.
in the chat, a lot of excellent comments. So we thank you for that and your effort. This was, to me, a fantastic judging session. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And
Okay.
some great pictures. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good. Have a good commercial shoot tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.
Yes, thank you. Yes. And a snooze in the afternoon, I think.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Nice to see you.
Thanks.
Take care.